Hello and welcome. My name is Audrey and today I will be your narrator. The creators of this content are Mariah, Alyssa, and myself. In this video, we are going to be discussing information about the gender wage gap. You may have heard of this wage gap, but what exactly is the gender wage gap? The gender wage gap is the average difference in the pay that men and women receive. When did this gap start? The gender wage gap became prevalent between the years of 1940 and 1960. Before the 1960s, job postings had separate categories for men and women, and higher-paying jobs were exclusively given to men. The Equal Pay Act was signed in 1963 and has helped a little in closing the gap. So why are we exposing the gender wage gap? It's unfair that women do the same work as men are getting undercompensated for it. Gender should have no effect on how people get paid, and everyone should get paid fairly for their work. There are common misconceptions about the gender pay gap. One misconception is that the gender wage gap is a choice and women do not work as hard as men. The wage gap is largely due to discrimination and stereotypes placed on women. For example, women with children are expected to stay at home while their male counterparts work. This contributes to the gender wage gap. In his article called "The Gender Pay Gap Continually Hurting Women," Grant Johnson states, in 2012, full-time female workers made 77 cents for every dollar earned by their male co-workers, which leaves a wage gap of 23%. Another misconception about the gap is that the gap doesn't exist or that women do not work as hard as men, thus resulting in women receiving less pay. What is the future of pay equality? Statistics from the Institute for Women's Research Policy that tracks the gender wage gap says if we continue at the pace we do now, it'll take 40 years for women to earn as much as men. Black women will earn the same as white men in the year 2130, and Hispanic women will earn the same as white men in the year 2224. What is the difference in pay between men and women at different ages? Kathleen Elkins writes on data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in her article called "Here's How Much Men and Women Earn at Every Age." Statistics say that women earn less annual income ranging from $23,000 to $47,000 compared to men's annual income ranging from $27,000 to $62,000. The statistics also say that women's peak income is lower than an average man at $46,540 compared to $61,932. Joanne Lippman, one of the nation's most prominent journalists, wrote an article called "Let's Expose the Gender Pay Gap," where she exposes many large companies. She calculated that women surgeons and doctors make only 71% of what their male colleagues do. Many people wonder the simple question of, why are people so biased about the gender pay gap? The answer to that question is not very simple. According to research done by SurveyMonkey in an article by Katie Stemmons, 24% of men believe the gender pay gap to be fake. The poll also showed that 46% of men believe that the gender pay gap is made up to serve a political purpose and is not a legitimate issue. Other factors can make people biased. For example, ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is a natural tendency for humans to view the world through their own cultural lenses. This means people tend to look at things from their own perspectives. Some people may not see how the gap affects women because they themselves have not experienced the gap or are unaffected by it. Another factor that can make people biased is unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is also known as implicit bias. It is when we unconsciously associate stereotypes with people. This is an involuntary behavior and impacts the way we feel or think about something with little to no reasoning. It can be positive or negative. Last but not least, confirmation bias can affect people's biases. Confirmation bias is a tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs. This can have negative effects as people tend to block out new information that disagrees with their beliefs, thoughts, or ideas. What has been done about the gender pay gap in the past? In 1963, Congress passed the Equal Pay Act. This forced employers to pay male and female employees the same wage. We have various laws in place that make it illegal to pay based on gender. 42 states have equal pay laws, and in 1883, Western Union Telegraph went on strike to fight for equal pay for their female employees. What can we do in the future? In the future, we should speak up on injustices that occur. We should keep advocating for equal rights, and we should express new ideas or ways that we can ensure that everyone is getting paid fairly. Want more information on the gender wage gap? Before looking into more information on the gender wage gap, you should take a few precautions. 1. Make sure to look at a variety of sources for information. 2. You should get information from unbiased and credible sources. And 3. You should listen to both sides of the argument. Here are some different types of sources. To start, there is scholarly or academic sources. These sources are academic articles, which are peer-reviewed, they can be derived from a library database, they use strong references, and have a credible author, typically someone who is an expert in the topic. The next type of sources is popular media. These sources are presented to entertain or promote a point of view. They are not peer-reviewed, they are written by staff or freelance writers, they use popular language, they are usually short, and they may or may not contain references. Then there are biased sources. These sources are usually one-sided, they use exaggerated language. If the source is online, the website may contain a lot of ads. The author is usually not credible, there is more use of emotion rather than facts, and references can be dodgy. Here is an example of a biased source. You can click directly on the video or find the link in the description. Here's how to avoid being biased in your research. It is important to consider multiple sources. It is best to have a variety of information. You also want to avoid being biased, but view biased sources to see both sides of the argument. You can also play devil's advocate and voice your own opinion to see different perspectives of others. And lastly, you should recognize your own personal bias in order to fix them. The end! Thank you so much for watching our video, guys.